What's up, everyone? We're back, and welcome to Doctorly Unhinged. And today we have a super exciting episode. Dr. Maxfield looks extremely unthrilled right now. We have some life updates. We have our product of the day. We're going to be talking about the insane Microsoft outage that has led to airline delays across the country. Then we're going to be talking about eyebrow blindness and other beauty trends that many people regret. And finally, we're going to talk about making homemade sunscreen. Do we like it? Do we make our own homemade sunscreen? We're about to find out. And I actually have a hot topic for the life update. So I'll let Dr. Maxfield go first.
Nice. Well, I think you need to do your life update first because mine really lends to the first topic at hand. My only life update is travel related.
Okay. So a couple of things are happening. One, life update is next week. Dr. Maxfield and I are both, which means we're probably going to miss a week of the podcast. Both of us are going to be in Las Vegas talking at the Cosmoprof convention, which is it's like a trade show of sorts, where a lot of companies display their latest innovations in ingredient development, packaging, design, even product development. Some brands are presenting, and it's actually going to be Dr. Maxfield, me, and Dr. Shireen Idris talking on a panel about creating content as dermatologists on social media and just being dermatologists in general. And so it's going to be an interesting panel for those who are going to be attending Cosmoprof. So that's coming up. Other update, I've become extremely passionate about a very, very, very hot button topic, and that is dangerous marketing. Okay. And what do I mean by that? Because, people get worked up about clean beauty. They get worked up about non-toxic, toxic, natural, not natural, chemical versus not chemical, right? And that's not dangerous marketing. It's misleading. It's fear-mongering, but it's not dangerous. And I got hit with a dangerous marketing tactic, and it caused me a lot of issues over this past week. And I'm very passionate about this. This is going to probably lend to a longer YouTube video, but I had a really bad allergic reaction this week. And right now I have triamcinolone, which is a steroid, all over my face to calm this allergic reaction down. And the reason why I had this allergic reaction is because the product packaging said that it was free of an ingredient that I was allergic to. Okay. And it was not free of this ingredient per se. It was technically free of that ingredient, but it wasn't free of its derivative ingredient that is also has a 50% cross reactivity with it. So it's might as well be the same thing. And we don't, you know what I mean? When you say things paraben free, if there was parabens in there, people are avoiding parabens because they think it causes some long-term health risk, or that it's an endocrine disruptor. They're not avoiding it because they have an allergy. Most people don't have allergies to parabens. But people, when they avoid ingredients because they have an allergy to them, to mislead somebody by saying that allergen is not in the product is extremely dangerous in my mind. So I have very strong feelings about this. I'm not going to go into the details about the product or what exactly I'm talking about, but just know that I had an extremely bad allergic reaction due to very dangerous marketing tactic. And we're going to do a whole YouTube video on misleading marketing, but that's not just misleading because it steals your money, but misleading because it's actually dangerous to the consumers. And if I didn't have access to steroids, I would have had to go to urgent care. So I think this is terrible.
Oof. Okay, so yeah, I want to hear more. I'm excited to kind of dive into this with you here soon. It is a very interesting topic, and I'm excited to talk at length about this because already my mind is going to okay, unscented, fragrance-free, natural, even dermatologist approved. Things that are moving you as a consumer, but there's actually a lot of nuance behind it that is going to be really important to you. Same thing. If you're buying a latex-free anything, all I could think of is condom at the moment. But if you're buying something that's latex-free and you are allergic to latex, and there's a latex derivative in there, that's devastating. That's disastrous, potentially catastrophic for someone. So that particular instance, yeah, that's very dangerous. Indeed.
I'll tell you, the equivalent of what happened to me would be the equivalent of if you put on the front of packaging that a product was peanut free, and it was processed in a peanut processing facility. And people aren't avoiding peanuts just because they're health monger, fear mongering health fanatics. they're avoiding peanuts because it can kill them. Now, so you know what I mean? Like, to say that it's not doing that to sell the product is extremely dangerous. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like that to me is like borderline like malpractice level danger. So that's kind of the situation I've found myself in. And so I'm going to take a very strong stand. And I don't really take a lot of strong stances, but I'm going to take a very strong stance on some of these marketing terms. And that includes things like free of fragrance when it has fragrance, unscented. I think also it borderlines on danger. I think free of synthetic fragrances. I think this like peanut free, all these things. I think I'm going to take a very strong stance on this.
All right. Nice. Prepared to get worked up. Coming soon. Emotions. The next part, I guess, is my life update. Is that right?
Yeah. So what happened with you with the flights?
Okay. Well, first off, we'll tease this maybe even at the end, but next week. Oh, you'll be listening to this. You'll be listening to this after this. It drops. A big drop happening. Check it out. There should be a lot of things popping up, and you get to be a part of this. So I'm super excited about this drop that's going to come to you this week. I hope it's meaningful and impactful for you all. But for my life updates, I was traveling this week to Tennessee, and so I was hopping on a flight, and we get halfway to my second, what do you call it, middle stop. The flight, okay. Not against, if you work at American Airlines, like, I'm sorry, this is not directed at you. This is just directed at the idea of American Airlines. 10 for 10, like counting it out per flight. The last 10 flights I've had with American have all been delayed. This was just the worst of the bunch, and not entirely their fault this time. It was somewhat weather related, but still. We get to the middle stop, Charlotte, and it's late. We arrive 30 minutes late. The next flight is delayed. So I'm like, okay, I still have time. I'm going to make the next flight. At least I'm going to get there overnight. Then we sit on the runway for a solid hour and a half. Not any exaggeration there. At least an hour and a half waiting to get off the plane and deplane. Invariably, I miss the next flight. I miss all flights. There are no more flights leaving out of the airports. The rental car areas are closed because it's after midnight. And so I'm like, okay, you got to go to the American Airlines help desk. So I go there. It is long. It's a mile long. It's not a mile long, but I waited an hour, a solid hour. I wasn't even halfway there. And at that point, I said, I mean, they were just sending people to like hotels. There were no flights leaving the next morning, even. They're all booked. So I was like, I'm just not going to get there. So then I actually rented an Uber at 1 a.m. I took the Uber all the way home. Shout out to that guy who gave me
Uber from where to where?
Charlotte to Wilmington.
Whoa.
So it was a 4-hour drive, and he drove.
You know what's crazy though is like, one, they accepted that call, and then they got to get back. Like, what do?
They drive. He was the beginning of the
how
shift.
Does Uber compensate them for like the 4 hours back?
It's just, oh yeah, that's right. That's true. Well, so there's like some behind the scenes stuff here. So what I did is I texted him first. So as soon as they accepted the thing, I was like, okay, let's see who picks up. I texted him. I was like, hey, this is a long drive. Are you up for this? Because I wanted to be respectful of his time and make sure he knows what he's getting into, which was good because apparently on both Lyft and Uber, it just says like 60-minute plus drive, and it doesn't tell them any other details. So anyway, we got to talking, and yeah, we feel each other out. Like, do you really want to spend 4 hours with me in the car, and vice versa? Is it worth it to you?
You had like a conversation. You like vetted this person before you.
It was mutual. He had the same idea. He was like, yeah, I've been trying to call you. My do not disturb was on. He's like, I kept getting voicemails. Like, oh, sorry. Yeah, it's late. And he's like, yeah, I just wanted to talk to you, get to know you a little bit first, because this is going to be a long drive. I want to make sure this is like a good thing. I was like, okay, good. Me too. And we agreed, like, yeah.
So did you pay him within the Uber app, or did you cancel the Uber and pay him cash?
I don't want to say.
Okay.
You know,
I don't want to get in trouble. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Maybe you gave him a little extra or something.
All right,
we'll
that's
just
fair.
Say that.
Okay. How much did this ride cost?
It was expensive. At least a few hundred. But here's the deal: is like, I knew I wasn't getting anywhere, and at that point, I was somewhat optimistic I was going to get refunded because obviously it was a disastrous experience. Like, I didn't make it all the way there. Like, I just sat on the plane in the runway forever, and it was their fault. Which I did get a refund from the airline, so I bet and I won. But yeah, that was exhausting. I got back at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. Went to it the next day. But for all of you who are having like a moment of sympathy for me, everyone else now at the airport. So that was Wednesday night overnight. I get back Thursday morning. Then this starts, this whole catastrophic travel. So as bad as I might have had it, there are probably tens of thousands of people who have it just as bad or worse today. And I feel for you, especially for those of you with little kids or like very important events you're trying to get to. Like, at least I didn't miss out on someone's life event. But this Microsoft thing that is impacting flights, all over the world, this is wild.
Wait, I want to touch on it before we get into this Microsoft thing. I want to kind of comment on what you just said there. Like,
okay, good.
A lot of times, so I travel mostly for work. So when I travel and I miss something and it's work related, it's annoying for sure. When I'm traveling and I'm trying to get home, it's annoying for sure. It's inconvenient. But a lot of people travel because funerals, weddings, and to miss a flight due to like airline error is, everyone's banking on these things, right? And it can be devastating. I've seen a lot of people crying in airports, mostly around funerals.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're already devastated because they lost somebody that they love, can't make it to the funeral because or they have a loved one in the hospital, trying to get to the hospital. So it's not like a small thing. When you travel for business, it's not like life changing, but when you travel for something else, it could be a really big deal. Like a wedding, like what if you miss your own wedding? Hopefully you're flying in a little earlier, but it's a big deal, right? So anyway, go tell us why this happened and what's going on, because it's actually pretty insane that the widespread nature of this outage.
Actually, I'm going to let you fill them in because I think you're a little bit more versed on this. But I have a lot of personal anecdote with this. I actually know 2 people today who were trying to fly out, and all the flights are canceled across multiple airlines today. 2,200 flights, in fact, canceled, with over 7,000 delayed as of midday.
Oh, I saw 22,000 flights on one website. Said 22,000 flights were delayed.
All right, this may not even be up to date. So, like I said, that was about 4 hours ago. And so yours is probably the more up-to-date number. But
okay, so let me give you the background. So there's a company called CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is a cloud computing cybersecurity company. It was started by a former McAfee employee. If you guys remember McAfee, it was on every Microsoft computer ever. And McAfee, also a very interesting gentleman himself. I believe he passed away, or he was on the run, like potentially the last time. But anyway, that's a totally separate aside. It's a cybersecurity company, and it operates on sort of a cloud network, and it services many, many, many different companies, very, very important companies. And it includes airports and airlines, a lot of the Microsoft software, including banks, airlines, like I said, hospital systems, even 911 call operator systems. And so this CrowdStrike system went through an update. And during that update process, it updated all these thousands and thousands of computers and networks that it was attached to. And it basically just killed everybody's computer and gave them what we call like the blue screen of death, which if you've ever had a Microsoft computer, it's basically when you load the computer and it like just continuously restarts and the screen is blue. And we call that the blue screen of death. And apparently it's fixed and you can just like reboot your entire systems, but it's not very easy to reboot an entire like airline system. So whatever update they did just like killed everything that they were doing. And there were 911 operators that were down in like Austin. Apparently the entire state of Alaska, their entire 911 operator system was down as a result of this CrowdStrike update. So CrowdStrike update. And pretty insane that one piece of software, which if I'm like a hacker, and I recognize that there's like this one system that like universally could be taken down. I mean, it's pretty damaging. There's also some other crazy stuff going on in the world, but we're going to skip over the politics of the world because probably it'll be in the history books, obviously. We kind of lived through that this week, which has been pretty crazy to watch the fallout of that.
Yeah, that's true. Right. So that aside, a lot of people are missing major life events. And it is so I actually worry about like cybersecurity hacking all the time because it's just wild. Every day, a major company, a major hospital organization, a government like Indonesia or multiple others. What was it? Let's see, Disney, whatever. is getting hacked. And while this was not a result of cybersecurity, or so they're saying, it just is wild how dependent we are on various either cloud platforms, internet devices, like software. It's the world we live in is actually incredibly vulnerable, and it's just wild.
Now, if this was just software, and you have a good point actually here, because I am a conspiracy theorist at heart, and if this was, so they're saying it was an update error, that they had updated the system, and when they updated the system, like there's a bug of some sort. Now, if this was a hacking situation, CrowdStrike would go out of business almost immediately, because their function is cybersecurity. So if they got taken down, like the reason why Microsoft and all these banking systems and all these, they use this company to prevent cybersecurity attacks. So if they in turn got cybersecurity attacked, or they got cyber attacked, then literally the basis of this company is like flawed. So like, even if they did, they would hide it till the end of time, because if that was the reason they went down, I'd imagine that a lot of companies would move on from them or not renew their contracts, because that's devastating. And this is tens of millions of dollars mistake. I would say, like, companies lost revenue, like when you cancel all these airline flights, when all the banks are down and you can't make transactions. I mean, this is a tens of millions of dollar impact that this update had on the country.
Oh yeah, it's wild.
All right, so let's move on to the next topic, which is definitely much more beauty skincare related, and that is, are you suffering from eyebrow blindness? And this is coming out of the New York Post, reposted from the New York Post from Brick Cato, who I've actually done a few interviews with myself, and also like kind of reposted to MSN is the link we're reading off right here. But basically, this is about eyebrow blindness, but also other beauty trends that many people are often either embarrassed that they've tried or regret that they've tried them. So let's kind of talk about eyebrow blindness in general. And the idea is basically that you kind of look at your eyebrows and how they've changed over time. My eyebrows were very, very thin. I don't know if I've ever told this story on YouTube. I probably have on early days, but my sister, when I was a 12, I want to say, was like, you have an unibrow, your eyebrows are crazy. Like, I need to pluck these. And she one day just kind of sat me down in the bathroom. She plucked my eyebrows real thin. And ever since I was 12, I was like, well, now I'm committed to doing my eyebrows, because once your eyebrows start growing back, right, you go like, well, I don't like the way it looks when it's growing back now. So like, you're kind of committed, right? So I had really thin, I had those like really thin eyebrows through high school and then beyond. And then I probably went, by the time I got to med school is when I started to like grow out my eyebrows a little bit thicker, but still clean them up, right? So like, I still clean up my eyebrows, tweeze them, I get them threaded every now and then. So I do clean up my eyebrows still even to this day, but now they're just thicker than they were before. And now they're saying, well, thick eyebrows are out and thin eyebrows are back in. And so these are kind of like trending themes. And so let us know in the comments if you've ever had eyebrow blindness. And I also want to know Dr. Maxfield's eyebrow grooming routine.
It is basic. In fact, I don't have one. There was a time, actually, I don't remember who, but someone took to plucking the middle. I get little hairs in the middle of the eyebrows, and so someone went after those. They didn't come back, and so that kind of lends to some of the permanency associated with different trends. Now, what was it? The 90s, thin eyebrows were in, and no, early 2000s. I don't know, because it is a reoccurring theme that people are regretting plucking their eyebrows. Like, I actually see it in the office all the time, especially within the last 5 years when fuller eyebrows were coming back. And now you're saying, or this is saying, that we have collectively decided once again, thin eyebrows are back. So whatever you do, don't do it permanently. If you're going to pluck judiciously, because I can tell you firsthand, many people have regretted plucking their eyebrows for thinner look and then thicker look. And now, I guess, thinner look. But for me, yeah, my eyebrows just exist.
You can always, it's hard to get things back. It's much easier to have things be thicker and then take off more. So like, kind of always err on the side of thicker. And some people will notice that if they've either been getting their eyebrows waxed, threaded, tweezed, when they're throughout their life, what they'll find is that their hair doesn't grow back as thick as it once did. And theoretically, these shouldn't cause permanent hair loss, but there is something called traction alopecia, and kind of that traction on the hair and that constant tugging and pulling on the hair follicle can theoretically damage the hair follicle. So in scenarios where you're just, even though they're not considered permanent forms of hair removal, you'll find is like people's hair is more sparse in those areas, and it's just due to that trauma response of your hair follicle. And so theoretically, you could have difficulty growing back the hairs in those areas, even though they're not technically permanent hair removal strategies. And then there are other things that people are doing to their eyebrows, and it's part of this article as well. And that's something like microblading, permanent tattoos in this area. And microblading was very, very popular. And microblading is kind of like a superficial tattoo. It's like kind of a semi-permanent tattoo, and then it goes away with time. It's not placed as deeply into the skin as like a traditional tattoo is. I have a lot of patients that have gotten real tattoos like before microblading was a thing, usually much older patients, in their 70s, late 60s. And then they really don't like it because it eventually starts looking blue with time. And they'll ask me whether or not they should get laser tattoo removal in order to get rid of these. And then microblading, which doesn't last as long. But a lot of my patients have regretted it and asked me if there was anything I could do to remove it. In fact, I had a patient probably about a month ago that came in and asked me if there was anything I could do about the microblading because she didn't like the way that it looked. And she had darker hair in the eyebrows. And I was like, there's really nothing I can do to get rid of this at this point because it's just going to take time. It's going to have to go away on its own because I can't laser tattoo removal because it will also take out your hairs in the process because there's no way for the laser to know the difference between this color and that color. So, it's not like it is semi-permanent. You can't once you've done it, you're sort of committed to it. So try to avoid things that, are permanent. I also have a lot of patients with, cancer and other, alopecia areata that have sort of permanent hair loss or semi-permanent hair loss, and then they get microblading and it ends up looking great as well. But just be thoughtful before you do anything that's permanent because you have to think about the reversibility and whether you want to look like that long term.
All right, so let's take up both sides of this. So if as we are reading, thin eyebrows are back in, which I didn't know, no surprise. I'm never on the cutting edge of these things, but
I saw it. It's just kind of like when people are like bell bottoms are back in. I'm like, no. They're not in because I'm not allowing them back in. And same thing with thin eyebrows. I seen it on TikTok and I'm like, not going to happen to me. Nice try.
Okay. So for someone who is going to go that route, what would be the safest way? Because I'm trying to think through this, what would be the safest semi-permanent way to thin the eyebrows? Would you still go threading? Is that permanent?
I would say shaving, but the stubble doesn't look great when it comes back in and it doesn't last as long. So shaving won't affect the root at all. So it's probably the safest thing if you don't want any long-term damage to your hair follicles. And then I would say threading is the safest. And the reason why I think that, tweezing and threading are the same. It's just that tweezing is going to take you much longer, but waxing I do think causes more damage to the skin. So if you're on retinol, it can definitely rip up your skin. So top tip there. But also, I do think it pulls a lot on the surrounding skin, and that can also damage the hair follicles just due to that low level of inflammation. So if you are going to get your hair removal, I prefer number one for safety would be shaving. Number two would be threading. I do threading.
Nice. Yeah, I'd say I'm with you. So threading, which one day I'm just going to have to go do that with you just so I know what this is all about. But thread it, but then I wouldn't thread it. I wouldn't err on razor thin. If you're buying into the thin thing, just make a compromise and go medium thin. So then which will happen, of course, 5-10 years from now, thick is back, then you have some flexibility there. Now, if you have already threaded or plucked your eyebrows out of existence, what can a person at least try to do to help them grow? Because I do have that question a lot, and there are certain things that may be beneficial.
Two things. One, topical Latisse. So if you're using Latisse for your eyelashes, it's topical prostaglandin, can be quite effective also for the eyebrows. Now, some people get inflammation from prostaglandins. Some people are allergic to prostaglandins. Some people get some dark circles from prostaglandins if you're using them on the eyelashes. It shouldn't affect the eyebrows as much, but it's effective. you can also use topical minoxidil. Again, like if you're somebody like me who uses topical minoxidil and gets puffiness around the eye, you're going to hold more water. So I've already talked about this before, but I do think it can be an effective way to thicken the eyebrows, and a lot of people will report that. And then finally, you can get an eyebrow hair transplant. And I have a really good one I post on social media, and maybe I'll post it on Instagram as well so more people can see it.
Nice. Yeah, that's a fun video. Actually, it's one of my favorites that you've posted in a while. Not that I don't love all of your content, because sure, I love it all. But that was like a very, I also never see it. Like you led that video with, I don't see this much. And yeah, I never see that. So that was a cool video. I also like,
you know, what I also saw recently on TikTok, and I feel like the shingles, like I never see shingles on TikTok.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I do edit a video about shingles, which I think is fascinating, because shingles that affects the eye is a medical emergency. So is a video on TikTok I reacted to. So
you know why it is though? I think, and I'm not saying that like generationally there's no 60+ year olds on TikTok, because yes, I know you're there, but that shingles, it really is much more common the older we get. That's why the vaccine is what it was, 55+ at one point. But I actually had it when I had mono back in the day. So not a fun experience. I do like, back on topic, the Latisse for the eyebrows, because I've used them with patients. I think the efficacy is okay. But I do feel like the risk of the iris pigmentation is lower there. It's anecdote, but I feel like because it's not so close to your eye, it's probably not going to directly absorb into that area. And so I feel much more comfortable with people with lighter eyes using it there.
Yeah, I think this is actually probably worth a full YouTube video, actually. Maybe, Pat, let's add this to the list, because this is a good topic about eyebrows, and probably nobody's talking about them, and there's a lot of nuance we can add here. Let's go on to the next thing in this article that they mention is sort of a dying thing that people regret, and they talk about eyelash extensions. I'm going to be honest, I don't really know much about them, so I think this is just more a stylistic thing. Either you like them or you don't like them. Ultimately, I believe that they're like adhering them somehow with some type of glue or adhesive to the eyelid. But overall, some people love them, some people hate them, some people do them, some people don't do them. I've even seen some people remove their entire eyelashes, which I don't think it looks that great ultimately. But it's all personal preference.
But yeah, that's a non-permanent option. So, regret only lasts so long with that.
Right. So, ultimately that's going to be personal preference. And then the next topic's a little bit more medical, because, we've talked about this before, and that's, we talk about bleaching your eyebrows also. And, same thing as anything else. Buccal fat removal, which is the fat in the cheeks, removing them to kind of give you a more slender face, removing some of that baby fat, kind of gives you more of a chiseled looking face. So we've talked about this before, but this is something that Dr. Robert Singer in the article as a plastic surgeon is basically saying that it can be a good fit for the right patients, but he says that a lot of people do regret this procedure. So thoughts on this?
Yeah, and I think at the time we had a fairly tempered approach. We didn't, it is what it is. I do also personally think it kind of ages the face, which is mentioned in this article as well. And in my opinion, it seemed like something that was going to be a short-lived trending topic. I feel like the overall response wasn't really positive from the general public. And so I don't know when that type of procedure had its moment, if it was really going to kind of catch on to the masses and become like a widely adopted cosmetic procedure. So, and I think it's kind of died down, at least in terms of public conversation. But it is definitely something that you have, and we said this before, you certainly should know exactly what you're getting into and be very thoughtful before you approach that buccal fat pad removal.
Yes, absolutely. And, on the flip side, right, we're talking about, by the way, there was an article, and maybe we'll talk about this again in the future. So when we were talking about buccal fat removal, it was part of a longer discussion about Ozempic face. And Ozempic face is basically when you lose a ton of weight, and when you lose that ton of weight, your skin can look saggy and more wrinkled and more gaunt as a result of just rapidly losing weight and your skin not being able to bounce back fast enough, right? And people don't like the way that looks. And so when they lose weight rapidly, it's not an Ozempic problem, it's a weight loss problem. And, there are things you can do to remedy it. But I also saw that Galderma, which is a cosmetic injectable company that does Dysport and um, not what is it? It's Restylane. So they do Restylane and Dysport, which Restylane a filler, and they put out like some type of marketing brief where they basically said that they were going to take advantage of this Ozempic face situation and start marketing towards people with Ozempic face to get fillers, which I'm like, I don't know. I mean, this is just, I don't love that at all. You know what I mean? Like just taking advantage of people's like insecurities and like, hitting them with, if do you have Ozempic face? Well, then buy, go to your, doctor to get Restylane. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's kind of technically what everybody does. It just feels weird. I don't know.
It is weird. I mean, I don't know if their marketing approach is like that straightforward. I almost respect it, but it is kind of like, it's like, well, you have this, use this, like it is what it is. This will help. I don't know, but I agree. It's kind of targeting a specific group of people very, very bluntly.
Yeah. I feel like when the company is, I don't know. I guess technically that's what we all do with like, when we're talking about acne, like he's different, it's like kind of the same thing, I guess. So it's not different. It felt like a weird, like, I don't know, like taking advantage of like a vulnerable situation.
It definitely is I agree. It is a vulnerable situation. But here's what I bet it is. Because we're in the pharma world, my question is, did they get an FDA approval for this? Because
they probably can't even make that claim. That's a good point.
Unless they've done the studies, gone after an FDA approval, which is a huge investment. But then you actually have to market it exactly towards what it's approved for. So even with things like Botox, it's only approved for X, Y, and Z cosmetic concerns. So you can only speak to that. Even the reps talking about the product can only speak to what it's approved for. And they're like, oh yeah, if you want to use it off label, I can't talk about that. That's up to you as a medical professional. But I mean, if they've pigeoned themselves into that pigeonhole, if they pigeonholed themselves, then they've kind of gotten them to they're at a point where they're obligated to talk only about that specific group of people in that setting.
Right. Right. So yeah, you're right. There's limitations. They probably can't do like heavy marketing around it, but maybe they're going to go to doctors, do the peer-to-peer marketing and say like, hey, like, this is great for people who are on Ozempic. And then they won't do any like actual marketing themselves. I don't know. I mean, you're technically right. So, I mean, because this is into the next topic, right? Because they're saying in this article, buccal fat removal is something a lot of people regret because it can actually make them look older. And then they're saying a lot of people regret filler, which is the opposite of buccal fat removal. Because one, you're taking away volume, and then with filler, you're putting in volume, right? So these are kind of like opposite. So it's so interesting. Like some people want to add volume, some people want to take away volume. Everyone, someone just posted on one of my videos today. They were like, brother gained weight. It's like, wait a minute, okay? I'm actually down for my peak weight. And I'm proud of myself. So, but like, and ultimately people are like, I have a lot of buccal fat. I always have. So it's just, for me, I wouldn't want to add more volume to my face, because I already have enough volume in my face. Right. So I guess it really kind of depends on the person, but they're saying a lot of celebrities, and we've talked about this before, a lot of celebrities have dissolved their filler. That's a popular trend. And there was even this really good video I saw on TikTok about they did like some type of like 3D MRI of the face, and they were showing like filler and how it distributed over this person's face over their sort of lifetime and what had dissolved and what hadn't dissolved. And a lot of people don't like the way that their filler looks over time because a lot of times it either migrates or it just it's not the look that they wanted, especially around their lips where there's not really planes in which it can stay. And so a lot of people are dissolving their filler, but we've talked about this before, but have your thoughts changed on filler, and are you still doing filler, and what are your thoughts?
No. Yeah, I've always had a very modest, reserved approach to filler. I just was one of those things that's so easy to overdo. I just kind of prefer the softer, more natural look. I like the oh, you look good, but I can't figure out why kind of cosmetic appearance. It's just my personal preference. And so I've never, even though I've done filler, we trained in filler, I will do it very selectively. I really do it rarely, if at all anymore. I do like some of the looks. It can be subtle. It can actually be very volumizing and correctly when used to replace very thoughtfully anatomical things that are lost, like structural changes with time. But overall, I'm still kind of modest with my filler approach.
Yeah, same. Anyway, if any of my patients are listening to this, they know that I try to convince a lot of people not to do filler. Like the first thing I'll be like, let's try some other stuff first. There are times where I'm like, I really think this person would benefit from filler, especially like people who have like the nasolabial folds they want to get rid of, or somebody where you can see like a clear indent in their face from just volume loss in the upper cheeks. Like structurally, I'll put more, like I'll do it more often. Or even like somebody I had done maybe 3 months ago, she had like side profile, like a very unstructured jaw, I would say, and like putting a little bit of filler in her chin actually like kind of redefined her whole face and kind of lifted that jaw. So I do think there are times where filler to me is very meaningful procedure, but I really try to use it less and less and focus on the quality of the skin with things like lasers, where I just feel like I can get a consistent outcome with lasers every time that most people are going to be very satisfied with. And I just do a lot more lasers. I still do a ton of like neuromodulators like Botox, but I really try to be very modest with my filler. And I think I pretty much maintain that throughout my practice.
Yeah, same.
And let me see if there's anything else in this article that they mentioned. They mentioned dissolving fillers. They mentioned the eyebrows. They mentioned, how lips have changed shape over time, and there are a lot of lip trends that have come and gone. And so those are kind of the main ones that they mentioned. And most of these things are not permanent, but with like filler, most of the time can get dissolved. But when you're thinking about buccal fat removal and you're thinking about any like permanent tattooing on the face, just be very careful, because those are kind of long-term commitments that are much more difficult to reverse. So just put a lot of thought into it before you kind of hop onto a trend like that. Now, if it's a reversible trend, if you want to try it and your friend tried it and they saw some good results, I think there's no harm in doing that. But if it's something that's irreversible, just be a little bit thoughtful about trends, because they don't stay around forever. And the looks that people are going for don't stay around forever. Like you might think something looks great, but our parents put, brown carpets and green wallpaper all over the place. And if you were stuck to that forever, you'd be very, very sad. So think about whatever you're doing to your face, like decorating your house in many ways. And you have to decide whether or not you want something that is going to be permanent. Right now, we're like kind of decorating our house, and we want very neutral floors, neutral couches, because those are the more expensive items that we're going to have forever. And when you're talking about paintings and you're talking about duvet covers and whatever, like you can be a little bit more creative, because those are things that are not going to last forever. So just be a little bit thoughtful. And that's a great analogy I just came up with. I think I'm going to start using that in all my discussions.
It is good. Very good. Yep. So
let's talk about homemade sunscreen now.
That's it. So there is so this is not the first time it's come up. Obviously, people like to do home things. We want to empower you actually to have a lot of control over your skin at home to any extent. Like you'll see, we're going through great lengths to try to help you have excellent skin at home and empower what you do. There's a viral video from Nara Smith, and I'm not sure how they're actually pronounced, and her husband, Lucky Blue Smith. This article itself is out of Now, Toronto, talking about how dermatologists and across the board, this video where they are making homemade sunscreen. And yes, they make other things. It says they make toothpaste, bubblegum. They like to cook. That's excellent. My feed is filled with home cooking videos more than anything else. But then they make the sunscreen at home. And here, well, I guess just what is your take? It's obviously what it's going to be, but what is your take?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, listen, so content creation, right? It's an art, and a lot of people consume things without context. We've made mistakes. Other people have made mistakes. You try to get better, right? Now, when you're making a meal at home, and she does a lot of meals, cooking, things like that, it's not, very preference based, but with sunscreen, right now, making that video in a time where there's already a lot of fear mongering around sunscreen. And we know that if you don't wear sunscreen, it can cause skin cancer in a lot of people. And we also know that based on our last episode, that 22% of people in the UK think that sunscreen is actually unsafe for them. So there's a large majority of people that don't want to wear sunscreen, right? And then you kind of give them this option, like, well, you can make your own sunscreen at home with all of these natural ingredients. Why not, right? And I think actually like the video, and I think they had made a moisturizer in another video, or maybe I'm kind of blending the two videos together. But I mean, I think it was a thoughtful approach, but in the end, like sunscreen goes through very rigorous SPF testing in the United States so that that you're getting the SPF level on the packaging, right? So just because certain ingredients, like natural ingredients, have inherent SPF levels, right? Like coconut oil might have some degree of SPF in it. But it's not, and beef tallow, I think, has some inherent, SPF level in it, right? But the reason why sunscreens are regulated the way that they are is because we want to make sure that sunscreens, and honestly, our regulating body hasn't done a great job doing this either, so I can understand why there's mistrust in the system, but we want to make sure people are getting at least SPF 30 consistently across the board. And when you're making your own sunscreen at home, it's very, very unlikely that you're actually going to achieve that. And for people to go outside thinking that they're protected with something that is not protecting them, that can be very, very dangerous, right? So I do think like the video was beautifully made. I think that they chose thoughtful ingredients, but in the end, like it's not going to be effective, and using that would be dangerous. And also, and I've said this before, with making your own skincare products at home, it's not making your life any easier. It really is not making your life any easier. And if you're somebody who is like worried about chemical sunscreens and you're not going to wear sunscreen because it's a chemical sunscreen, then I think it is completely reasonable to go and use zinc oxide, titanium dioxide based sunscreens that are not homemade sunscreens that are not going to protect you.
Right. And so I thought that was actually I like the response. I like that take because I think they were thoughtful. And I think a lot of people are being very thoughtful when they're trying to make at-home sunscreens. So I'm not at all like condemning them for trying. I actually widely understand why they would want to. I mean, we're saying to make it and you don't trust big companies or you don't trust chemicals and this is like what you've decided you're going to try. Okay. Like I respect that. But with sunscreens, even on a recent live, someone was like, what do you think about this? I don't remember the brand now, the sunscreen scandal. And it was this year, like it happens every single year. And they're like, oh yeah, the sunscreen failed its SPF testing from another independent lab. And I'm like, okay, look, and right before that, I think I'd gotten the question, what do you think about making your sunscreen at home? And my take is like this, look, if these FDA regulated products, and then worldwide, these heavily regulated products, if their independent labs that test their sunscreen can't consistently deliver reliable SPF numbers, then what you're doing at home is it's almost impossible to replicate a consistent sunscreen. You can't duplicate what they're doing in the lab. Like as much as you try, you just can't consistently do it, especially when you like talk about batch volume and just doing this on a daily basis. So yes, it's certainly imperfect. I think to the point where it's largely ineffective. And therefore, it's not going to do what you really need it to do, and that's simply to protect your skin. Now, I will tell you this: like if you put on like a thick layer of mud and just cake it on your face, and you go out in the sun, you probably won't get burned for a little bit. Like there is a reality: if you slap on a thick layer of anything, it's going to protect you a little bit from the sun. But when you look at the effectiveness in sunscreen, there's like a very steep portion where it's vertical. Like the effectiveness declines dramatically. I'd say probably between the numbers of 15 and 30, and then it starts to plateau at 30. So that's why, like, if you get to an SPF 70, an SPF 50, an SPF 100, which is not necessary, there's a little bit of grace for imperfect application, for rubbing your face, whatever. There's a little bit of grace in terms of drop off and effectiveness. But when you're starting at an SPF of 15, when you're starting at an SPF of 10, the way that the effectiveness and the numbers work, it drops dramatically and precipitously. And so if you don't have that built-in buffer, then you're really not going to get much out of it at all. And then unfortunately, you're going to need to see someone years down the road wondering what happened to your skin.
Completely agree. And I think that most universally across the board from most experts, it's they debunk this. And, I think by and large, people don't consume our videos because they're trying to make their own sunscreens at home. So, I really don't, I imagine that the impact was low. There was also something from Andrew Huberman recently, and maybe we can discuss it because it's part of this concept. And he did a whole episode on skincare. And I really have to go dive into it because I think he does like an analysis of everything. And obviously we can kind of probably take it like point by point. But in his most recent post on Instagram, so Andrew Huberman is a neuroscientist based out of Stanford. He has a very, very popular podcast. I think probably one of the most popular health podcasts in the world. And most recently, he posted on his Instagram story yesterday. And I'll just have you react to this live, Dr. Maxfield.
All right.
He said, if you're concerned about sunscreen safety, okay, a mineral-based zinc oxide or titanium dioxide up to 25% concentration version is generally agreed upon as safe. People debate chemical-based sunscreen safety. No one debates a physical barrier. And he goes into more detail in the caption, and he says, in general, research points to sunscreens with mineral-based actives such as zinc to be safer. No, sorry, to be safe. There is some chatter about zinc dioxide being less safe than zinc oxide. No one debates a physical barrier. And of course, there are folks who are so pro-sun that they won't wear a barrier at all. The reality is sun exposure does age the skin. However, we do need sun exposure for our circadian rhythm and vitamin D and overall health, et cetera, et cetera. He discusses more, he says, on his episode. And that's pretty much the entirety of, the argument that he's making here. So what are your thoughts on this statement? Because it's caused a lot of other experts in the space to react to this and say that it's very dangerous.
I don't have much of a negative reaction towards it, to be honest. I almost kind of walk from back to front. The back end of it, proposing that the sun is actually good for the body or you as a person overall. I think, yes, everything in life has two edges. Everything in life is a two-edged sword. Yes, the UVB does help with sun exposure. Sunscreen does not affect that. Like studies have shown that even a small amount of sun is enough for you to synthesize vitamin D. I firmly believe that the sun is good for circadian rhythm. I firmly believe the sun and being outside or active is good for your mental health. And I think you have to balance that with protecting your skin. Like I'm very passionate about that. The other part of it is what he was doing between chemical and mineral sunscreens. Simply put, he's saying there's less pushback with mineral sunscreens. Like he made wide-reaching statements like nobody argues this or nobody's that. That's never the case. But I think he is accurate in that you will get much less pushback from a large portion of the population if you recommend a mineral sunscreen. There's a lot less concern for physical safety with mineral sunscreens. And I think it's reasonable to approach that conversation that way for a person, and we talk about this all the time with patients who come in with a predetermined, their mind is already set. They're not going to use chemicals, no matter what. You're not going to sway them over a 30-minute conversation or an hour-long conversation. And so you can start with the premise that, okay, chemicals are off board, mineral sunscreen, you feel is safe. Let's start there, protect your skin. And I'm okay with that. I am completely okay with that. I almost just would say I kind of agree. I don't have anything bad.
Yeah. So if you actually dive into the way that this was written, if you're concerned about sunscreen safety, is the premise of this argument, a mineral-based sunscreen is generally agreed upon as safe. People debate chemical sunscreen safety. No one debates a physical barrier, right? So what's interesting about this argument is it comes in with the premise if you're concerned about sunscreen safety, use a zinc or titanium-based sunscreen. There are people who are debating the chemical sunscreen. He actually doesn't even leverage an opinion here. He just basically says, like, if you're afraid of sunscreen is good for you, probably. And if you are concerned, use a physical sunscreen and not a chemical sunscreen. I don't think anything about this statement is actually inaccurate at all. I think it's very, very accurate. I think the challenge with this statement is that, like, if you were not concerned about sunscreen, now you may have reason to think, like, wait, is there something wrong with my chemical sunscreen? Like, why haven't I thought about this, right? He's a very large audience. So, but I don't think there's actually anything wrong or inaccurate about the statement. I don't think there's anything inaccurate about the statement. I think it's true that people debate the chemical sunscreen safety, even within the derm community. I think, even within, and I think that most people agree that, zinc and titanium sunscreens are effective. Not just that, okay? Even the FDA says this, right? So it's not even just like people, right? Like, it's not just like people in their, like, people with mics and podcasts are saying this. Like, this is the FDA. The FDA, there's something, the FDA, like, with ingredients. It's called Grace, generally regarded as safe and effective. And only two filters in the United States that are generally regarded as safe and effective by the FDA are zinc and titanium. So there's nothing inaccurate about the statement. It's just that the nuance of there is no evidence that chemical sunscreens have caused any like harm in humans, like specifically. But there is nuance. There's so much nuance into the chemical sunscreen topic. It absorbs into the body more than we thought. The conditions under which that happened are very unrealistic application conditions. And even though they absorbed more than we thought, we don't know that actually has a negative impact on the body. So there's a lot of like unknowns within the chemical sunscreen space. And as experts, Dr. Maxfield and I both agree that we still wear chemical sunscreens ourselves. We still recommend chemical sunscreens for our families. That is our general expert advice. There are other experts that will debate against us and say, well, because on a molecular level, some of these sunscreen filters have been shown to do X, Y, and Z, and because they're absorbed more in the body than we thought they would, we prefer to recommend only zinc and titanium-based sunscreens. There are both people, and they both have valid arguments. We stand aside on the side of chemical sunscreens being safe and effective until proven otherwise, and other people stand on the other side. And I think that's true. Now, I think if you're somebody who doesn't know anything about sunscreen and you want to take a clip from this video, I, as somebody who studied this stuff, I personally wear chemical sunscreens probably a lot more than I use physical sunscreens personally, just because I think that they're more elegant. I personally don't use oxybenzone because of overwhelming data about its allergenic capabilities. And that's my position. But if Andrew Huberman wants to wear zinc oxide, good for him. I also think that there's nothing inaccurate about a statement. I think it's completely accurate. And I think that I think the only harm that can be taken from this is if you are a huge Andrew Huberman fan, you don't know anything about skincare at baseline, and this is the only skincare piece of information you've ever consumed in your life, you probably will leave that thinking that you should prefer wearing zinc-based sunscreens over chemical sunscreens, when truly are they one more safe than the other? Probably ultimately not, but time will tell.
Yeah, exactly. Time will tell. I always say it for the Korean sunscreens, all the new chemicals, everything new that seems safer and flashy, but still effective. Time will tell. But yeah, it's a long, nuanced conversation. And I mean, if he does podcasts, I actually don't know much about him, then great. He's probably going to have longer, in-depth conversations that are going to better equip his audience than a 15-second TikTok saying chemicals are bad. So I'm okay with it.
Right. And he didn't even really say that. I mean,
he didn't say that. He didn't say that. Let's make it clear.
He really didn't even say that. And I think I should listen to the whole podcast because I would love to hear what his take was ultimately. But, I think, again, like any snippet taken out of context always has its challenges, right? And anyone could clip our videos together and make us say crazy things, or they could just use AI and generate my voice like they have for ads in the past. So, it's actually gotten bad to the point where we posted an ad for Remedy on the Remedy account, and it's really me. And someone wrote, "This is fake AI." And I'm like, oh no, like now the real videos people are going to think are fake. So we're now ending up in like a crazy scenario where like no one will know what's real and fake anymore. And we're just going to have to live with that ultimately.
Mm-hmm. It's wild.
Yeah. Well, here we are.
Oh, sorry. We forgot our products of the day.
Oh, what do you want to do? You want to hit the product of the day now?
Yeah, because I really like mine. I want to say it.
All right. Hit us with your end of the podcast product of the day. What is it?
So this is one, it almost could have made it into the vitamin C video, but it's Biossance's squalane and vitamin C dark spot serum.
Mm-hmm.
So squalane is like a perfect foil for irritation. I actually used this today. This has 10% L-ascorbic. Oh, it's 3-0. Oh, even better. It's 10% 3-0 ethyl ascorbic acid, squalane, white shiitake mushroom. It's not a greasy base, so unlike who has like Niod, they have an ethyl ascorbic acid that's in an oil base, and I don't love the aesthetics of that one at all, but I love the aesthetics of this one. Extremely gentle, extremely hydrating, feels great on the skin. And if you're looking for use vitamin C and you have sensitive skin, I think this is a great option for you. It sells for $65. So for vitamin C, Nowadays, honestly, that's pretty middle of the road. Some might even say budget friendly. I wouldn't go that far at all, but I would say middle of the road, quality product. I love it.
Yeah, I actually like that product quite a bit. It's got, some nice actives in it, but overall just great texture. And I just put on the Biossance Squalene and Copper Peptide Rapid Plumping Serum. I just think it's one of the most
nice
hydrating serums, most elegant serums. My product is going to be the Paula's Choice. I'm a big fan of Paula's Choice, and this product happens to be in front of me, and I've been using it for the last week, so I could speak knowledgeably about it. Paula's Choice Pro Retinaldehyde Dual Retinoid Treatment. So this is their highest strength retinoid that they have available over the counter. What's interesting about this product is that it uses retinaldehyde and adapanoid, and adapanoid is a precursor for adapalene. So retinaldehyde is a precursor for tretinoin, and adapanoid is a precursor for adapalene. And it's got both of these ingredients into one formula. And overall, it's nice. It's not like an extremely hydrating formula, so you definitely have to follow it with a moisturizer. But it's a very thoughtful formula for anti-aging and a very powerful formula for somebody who is looking for an over-the-counter retinoid product.
Yeah, that's interesting. Adapanoid. I'm actually not very familiar with that one. And so I'm going to have to read about that. I'm really interested to see how that one grows over the next few years, because I would love to see more adapalene over the counter. I'd love to see it used in creative ways. And if this is a way around the barrier to entry with that ingredient, then I'm excited for the future of adapanoid. It sounds great.
Yeah. No. It's one of those. It's kind of like how we use these derivatives of vitamin C that are then converted by the skin into the active form of vitamin C, kind of stabilizes them a little bit better, and also kind of gets past any regulatory issues that we have. But I just love, kind of the thesis of Remedy was to create very powerful formulas by combining the power of multiple ingredients into one formula. And when brands do that, even if they're not our brand, I still like, that's what my thesis of skincare is. So when other brands do it, I love it as well. And I think it's a great formula. And I think that it saves people money because you have products that are more effective and they don't have to buy so many different things. So this is it's not a beginner retinol. So if you're looking for a beginner retinol, go somewhere else. This is a much stronger one, but someone who's a little bit more acclimated is definitely a good product.
Nice. Love it.
All right. So that wraps it up. We covered a lot of stuff. Hopefully Dr. Maxfield doesn't get stranded again, because I will be seeing hopefully in Vegas this week, and hopefully we can post something live from the event. If anybody has, and we have this big announcement coming next week, hopefully, and we are looking forward to letting you know what Dr. Maxfield and friends have been working on, because I think it's something that's going to benefit all of you quite a bit. So stay tuned for that announcement. If it's live, we'll put it in the description, so you can click on the link, and it is super exciting, and I can't wait to share it with all of you.
Yep, super excited. Can't wait. Been waiting a long time to get this off the ground with some colleagues. And we'll see you next time. We'll hear you next time. You'll hear us. We appreciate you for being on this journey.
All right. Thank you all so much. We'll see you in the next episode.